Recruiting has slowed on the Plains for now, but has Auburn run out of recruiting magic? Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike D. And thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. Joining me as he does every single week is Auburn football recruiting expert extraordinaire, Kyle Rush from the barn. Kyle, before we started recording, we had a little chat about recruiting momentum. Right now, Auburn is not in an exciting spot from that number perspective, but it is June. However, that means something different in today's college football. Now, you've heard us talk about this if you listen to the show repeatedly. Early signing day has changed the timeline for a lot of these kids. A lot of them want to be committed going into their senior season, know where they're going to play their college football because they plan to enroll in the spring, and just put a do not contact on for their senior season while they concentrate on racking up stats. But is Auburn in a good position headed into fall camp? You seem to think that we've now reached the point where results on the field need to happen. Might be a bunch of guys in wait and see mode. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, it's not fun right now. I mean, if we're just being completely honest, like it's not real fun to follow. Usually you can see who's going to commit next. You kind of have a pretty good idea of where the next commitment's going to come from and when that might happen. And right now, it's just not there. It's just not there. And, you know, Vonnie Cleveland has moved up his announcement to this weekend. That's another in-state big-time target, and it's not looking like it's going to be Auburn. Now, that doesn't mean it won't be Auburn way down the road. Same with Marquez Daniels from Tuskegee that just committed to Florida. It doesn't mean that it won't be down the road, but Auburn's, I think always was going to have to win to have a good recruiting class this year, but it's never been more clear than it is right now that it's going to take results on the field, and flip season is going to be way more important than commit season is right now.
Kyle, remind me, we're getting pretty close to the summer dead period, aren't we?
Yeah. It actually starts Monday, this coming up Monday, which is different from last year. That's like a lot of people are like, remember, we went off in July last year. Well, that's because July, we still had Big Cat Weekend in July. Like we still had official visits in July. The dead period now is for the whole month of July and the last week in June. So you're done. Official visit season and everything was June now. So your June was July of last year. And, you know, this is really prime commit season, especially after the NIL ruling just went through. I thought, you know, commit numbers were down across the board for everybody. Everybody's kind of waiting to see what happens with this NIL ruling. It would go through and then, boom, Auburn will go on a run. Well, that run hasn't happened yet, and it's happening elsewhere. Like Georgia has gone up like 10 commits in the past month. A lot of schools in the SEC, Florida is really racking them up. And Auburn just is kind of not really going anywhere. And I know some people are like, well, that's, you know, totally expected because you can only sell vision for so long until you have the results on the field.
Yeah, look, they've done a fantastic job in light of 2 consecutive losing seasons, getting guys to commit to the Plains. But year 3 was always going to be about results.
Yeah.
Hugh Freeze pointed to this in a few ways when he got hired, saying, hey, look, by year 3, if we're not in the top 6 or 7 in recruiting, everybody here is going to be looking for a job. Now, this has always been looked at as a rebuild from the coaching standpoint and from 100%. An administrative standpoint. They said this was a rebuild. It was going to take a few years, but you've got to show progress along the way. Now, they've done it in recruiting. Last year's recruiting class, outstanding. The one before that, okay. But this next one is the one that Hugh Freeze feels like is going to complete the trifecta for Auburn. But progress has slowed a little bit. And I think that this is where, despite the fact that you're labeling it a rebuild, the 5-7 comes back to hurt you. If Auburn wins 8 games last year, we're probably not sitting here talking about the lack of momentum in recruiting June.
No, I mean, and you may be you may be like firing on all cylinders right now. I mean, just let's take Florida for a case study. Okay. Our Auburn's and Florida's records from the first 2 years are identical. Okay. I mean, to the T, like conference, I think, and overall total wins was identical. And remember, Florida's class last year sort of fell apart, not last year, the year prior, fell apart when they had their bad 5-7 year 2. And Auburn kind of reaped the rewards of some of those guys,
Right.
as a matter of fact. And then last year, it was an up and down season, but they finished their last 4 games really strong, and only ended up being 8-5. But they won their bowl game again. Beat LSU, a ranked LSU team, beat a ranked Ole Miss team, and then now they're like one of the hottest teams to discuss right now on the recruiting trail. And then, hopefully, that there's a lot of hopes as far as them this season. Auburn could do that. Auburn could be that same, could follow that same script. And I honestly think Auburn's in a better position going into year 3 from a roster standpoint than Florida was going into their year 3. So you could easily flip that switch and you could be that hot team. I really do think there's a lot of kids that probably want to come to Auburn. But it's just like, man, I just don't know yet. I want to see it first. And they're being told that too on every other visit
Yeah, for sure.
that they go.
Look, talk to me about a couple of the big names out there. Like I said, before we started recording, you mentioned that you don't feel like there are any big gets there on the horizon, but names like Landon Duckworth, that have been mentioned in the last few weeks. Auburn doesn't seem to have much momentum with some of these kids. Talk to me about those names and why you feel like Auburn's not making inroads.
Yeah, well, I mean, the inroads are there, but as far as to pushing towards a commit, I just, I don't really see it right now. I mean, you don't have to look further than just really the state of Alabama. I mean, it's a pretty deep class, and Auburn has, and Hugh have really put a priority on in-state kids. And your top 3 guys right now are probably all trending towards Alabama. Sedarian C.D. Morgan, Tank Jones, Xavier Crowell. C.D. and Xavier were both here this past weekend. Say all the right things, but probably are going to end up being Alabama commits. And I say commits and not players because you never know what will happen. You never know what will happen as the season unfolds. When you talk about Landon Duckworth, I think that Auburn's ready to kind of put their foot on the gas there, and maybe they can do what they have to do to close it. But I don't think there's really a commit imminent. I don't really think he's quite 100% ready to pull the trigger yet. But he did come back for a visit this weekend. It's really hard to point to who's next. It's really hard to point to who you think's coming up. And again, you just look at the state of Alabama and you don't really have a ton you can really point to that you can see, Auburn really moving the needle with, I guess, with a lot of these guys.
Look, Auburn's got some work to do, but will it be too late by fall camp? We'll talk about that right after a quick word from our sponsors. This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right across the street from the Chattahoochee Valley Community College, next to Renfro's Supermarket and Marco's Pizza. The Vibe Vault. If you're in the Columbus, Phoenix City area and you're looking to get fresh for the weekend, get fresh for the weekend with the Vibe Vault. Not just barbers, lifestyle consultants. This episode of the Auburn Express is brought to you by our friends at the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. Our guy Richard is a longtime sponsor of the show. Please go support them. I want to thank our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. It's the summertime. You want to be outside making some good meat in the heat. Do so with Golden's Cast Iron. Workout, grill out, chill out with Golden's Cast Iron. Let's jump back in here. What kind of timeline is Hugh Freeze working with in year 3? Kyle, and when will it be time to hit the panic button on recruiting? Now, it's going to sound alarmist to a lot of people saying, oh, look at the timeline. But the truth is that if you're Auburn, now it is time to show results. But I've talked over and over again about that kind of that fast forwarded timeline because of early signing day. If you're a kid and you're trying to get into fall camp somewhere, you got to get committed in December, which means knowing where you're going to go for most of the season. Now, after September, October, like how late can you get into this high school football season without those commits in the fold before it's time to hit the panic button? Like you said, it's may not be about the commit season, more about flip season at that juncture.
That's a great question. And the way I look at it is this: I'm not ready to hit the panic button on recruiting in general. What I would hit the panic button is if Auburn stumbles out of the gate, out of those first 5 or 6 games, and you're 500 or below 500. Then it's going to be really, really tough. I mean, you go to Georgia, you play Georgia at home. That's October 11th. October is about. That's what, if you're going to start making some moves, it needs to be by October. And Auburn has the potential to be able to do that. They have a very manageable beginning part of their schedule. And I think if you could come through those first 5, like I said, go into that Georgia game, if you could be going into that Georgia game 4-1, I think you have I think you'll see a lot of momentum, especially if you're lighting it up on the offensive side. But again, I think October is going to be tough. Now, every single year since the portal, as the portal's grown and as NIL's grown, you've seen the number of flips go up. And Auburn had 8, I think, last year. 8 of their 20 commits were flips last year. I think that number is probably going to have to be 10 plus for Auburn to be in that conversation. And I think that's very doable, especially nowadays. I think kids commit, make sure they have their roster spot, and then they go see what's out there. Hey, and that's a smart thing that's a smart way to do this. Let me get a deal locked in. It's only binding to them, not me. And then I'm going to go shop around and see if I can find something better. And the school that I may want to go to most of all may pop off, and it may look good as far as, continuing down the road. And it'd be the same staff, look like that same staff will be there 3 or 4 years down the road when I get there. So again, if you're the last, I think October is when you got to start hitting the panic button. If Auburn's struggling by then and, not really making any headway in the season, that's whenever it's going to be a little bit of a, oh dear, what are we going to do here? I think.
Depending on which services you look at, last year, 2025, when that recruiting class closed, Auburn finished 7th or 8th nationally, again, depending on which service you look at. That was good for 5th in the conference in recruiting. I want to make sure that our listeners understand how hyper competitive this conference is in recruiting. You compared Auburn a lot to Florida in those results. The team ranked right in front of Auburn last year was Florida, and they made a big move up with how they competed at the end of last season. But they were ranked 7th. Auburn was ranked 8th. Alabama came in at 3, Georgia at 2, Texas at 1. This year so far, you've got Auburn and Alabama down in the 50s in recruiting. As of today, we know they won't finish there. We know that will improve as many other SEC teams will rise the ranks. As a matter of fact, as it stands today, there are only 3 SEC teams in the top 10 in recruiting. That's LSU, Texas A&M, and Georgia. But you and I know that won't stay there. So points to the flips that you're talking about happening a little later in the process. I think Auburn has 7 commits in this 2020.
7 or 8 total currently.
Yeah, that'll go up. We know that's going to go up. They'll have 20-something commits.
And I still think, by kickoff, Auburn's probably going to have somewhere in the neighborhood of, I don't know, if you got 7 right now, maybe somewhere in the neighborhood of 13 or 14. Now that's where that's what they should have. Now, if you're asking me who that's going to be, like it's so hard to even know who that could be. But I do think there's going to be if you can get somewhere in the neighborhood of that 12 to 14 going into the season, and then you look to flip, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 guys, that puts you around that 20 number, which I think is more than enough. Nowadays, you got to basically get 20 high school kids and 20 out of you're going to get 20 high school kids and 20 out of the portal almost every single year, because you're just going to lose players every single cycle. So you got to get it done. You got to get it done. I mean, you got to get it done on the field. And here's the cool thing. I think they can, Mike. I think the roster's good enough. I think the roster's good enough to be 4-1 going into that Georgia game at home at night for the biggest recruiting, show of the weekend of the season. And sometimes you don't even have to win those games. Like, you just get the big atmosphere and get the kids there and just say, look at the direction we're going. We're headed in the right direction. You've seen what we've done. Auburn could easily, you win 9 games, you could easily have a top 10 class again.
Yeah, 4-1 headed into Georgia would mean that you likely opened your SEC slate 1-1. That means you split one of those 2 road games against Oklahoma and Texas A&M.
I'll take that right now.
Play. Yeah, give me that all. Inject that into my veins, Kyle. I take that all day. I think that getting one of those first 3 games, SEC games, is enough. I mean, that's a really tough slate. Oklahoma.
That's counting that you win Baylor. Like, you're assuming,
right?
Yeah, I agree with you. If you win Baylor, you win Baylor, split those 2 road games, and you're going into Georgia, and it's going to be a freaking electric atmosphere at night. One of the first night games you're playing Georgia at home in a long, long time, and you're going to have just a monster recruiting weekend, and Auburn will be right back on track. But that's what it's going to take. There's no real sell right now. You can't really sell your way out of it. You got to go produce.
Well, you got the schedule after Georgia to make a run. Name me an easier stretch than Missouri, Arkansas, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Mercer.
Yeah, I mean,
after Georgia, they've got the schedule to go on a run there and start stacking wins. Then you get into the national conversation, and if there's anything left on the board, I think that's where you see those flips start to come in for Hugh Freeze and his staff.
Yeah, you're talking about an opportunity to really, really build some momentum and some buzz. If you could come out of those first 6 games 4-2 or 5-1, you have an opportunity. Like you just said, you're going to be favored more than likely, and you're going to have a better roster than all 5 opponents that you play, like the next 5 games that you play. Man, if you could roll into that Alabama game at 9-2 or 10-1, holy cow! Like, you're talking top. I mean, shoot, you may be talking top 5 class and in the playoff talk. So the good news is, and the difference between Auburn, everybody loves Florida right now. The difference between Auburn and Florida going into both of their year 3s, I think Auburn is way ahead from a roster standpoint than where Florida was when they started their 3rd year.
Yeah, well, right now, Florida has their quarterback, no doubt. Will Auburn have their quarterback? That's going to answer a lot of the questions that we have about the ceiling of this team. They've stacked the deck around the quarterback, no doubt. There are no questions about this wide receiver room nationally. Everybody knows the names. Everybody knows Cam Coleman. They know Perry Thompson. They know Eric Singleton. And they now know Malcolm Simmons from the season that he had last year, making headlines with big play after big play. Can you finish off drives? And if Auburn had averaged 28 points per game in Power 4 play last year, Kyle, they might have won every game they played. That's such a low bar at today's college football, relatively speaking. So,
I mean,
go ahead.
You could just take 5 or 6 plays. You could be 5 or 6 plays away from 3 or 4 more wins last year. You know what I mean? And that gives me the little bit of hope that when you talk about progression from year 1 to year 2, yes, there was some tangible items that you could point to, but those things just didn't equate to wins. And that's what has to change this year. And if you can kind of carry the momentum on the offensive side over into this year and then correct those little things, again, I think you're just looking at an opportunity to have a really good ball team this year.
Yeah, I think so. Look, recruiting has to pick up. It will pick up. How much will it pick up? We'll continue to track that as the offseason turns into the season. Either way, I'll be here. You'll be here. Kyle, I want to thank you for joining me. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can subscribe to thebarnauburn.com, join our message board, join the conversation, and we'll update with you. We'll update you on recruiting as much or as little as there is news to update right now. So, but regardless, you can jump in the conversation, have some fun, and then subscribe to the Barn Auburn YouTube page where you can catch all of our content.
Love the Barn, the best moderated board, Auburn board on the web, hands down, bar none. Love the work that you guys are doing. We support it here at the War Report. Guys, if you're in the comments after this video and you want to support us here, smash that super thanks button. Show us some love. SEC Media Days is coming. We'll be there all week, bringing you guys lots of great coverage from the College Football Hall of Fame in Atlanta. That's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express. If you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. CW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.